In today's episode of HR Visionaries, we talk to Alex. We talk about her role that includes people and places, hence how important it is that employees have a great place to work. Stay tuned. Welcome to HR Visionaries, where we unlock the secrets of modern HR. I'm Benjamin, your host. Join us as we shed light on today's HR universe with HR leaders and innovators from across the globe. Whether you're an HR pro, a business leader, or just curious about the future of work, this is your shortcut to the forefront of HR innovation. Brought to you by Hire, the AI talent attraction platform. Welcome to the latest episode of HR Visionaries. I'm very much looking forward to my guest today, Alex. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Benjamin. Happy to be here.
Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Who are you?
Who am I? Oh, gosh. So I am the VP of People and Places at Enable. Enable is a rebate management company. Our vision is to enable trusted trading relationships so that we can all serve customers better together. And I manage our People and Places teams. So you can think of People and Places as traditionally HR and facilities. We spice it up a little bit. So instead of HR and facilities, we're People and Places. And those teams manage everything from payroll, benefits, employee experience to performance management, hiring, firing, all the things that you think of when you think of humans and buildings.
Right. So is there a reason why you combined the two? Why it's like people and places?
I think you're the first person to ask me that question. Part of someone's employee experience has so much to do with how they feel when they walk into an office, how they feel if they're a remote employee, right? Do they feel connected to their peers? Do they feel that they belong somewhere? There's lots of HR or people policies, programs, efforts that you can make on the people side, but without a really strong counterpart from the workplaces side, from the security side, from the holiday party side, that's kind of an incomplete picture. So we've combined both of those forces to create a wonderful employee experience from a 360-degree view. The second that someone says yes to us, right, they're getting their swag, they know where they're sitting, they know how to access the office. All those things are typically, handled by a facilities team. But now that they're under the people purview, we can really turn it into more of an experience instead of something that just needs to happen.
It's a super interesting perspective. But you're absolutely right. So, a main part of the employee experience is obviously the building you're working in, the desk you're sitting at, and obviously when you work from home, it's also the experience. How connected am I to the rest of my team? It's super interesting. What does constitute the perfect office for you?
Oh gosh, I think that has changed so much over the last 5 years. If you had asked me pre-COVID what the perfect office would mean for me, and just for context, I started my HR career actually in HR and facilities. I was the EA to a really killer CHRO, and I was also the office manager, and I was her coordinator, and I was recruiting, and I was doing payroll. So I really feel like I got baptized by fire, just being thrown into the deep end. But that was how I learned how to run a really wonderful office. And so I just kind of kept that with me throughout all my roles and turned it into, almost by force, a component of the employee experience. But I think, back then, pre-COVID, I would have said a great office, is easy to access. One of the biggest barriers for employee productivity is they can't hit the Wi-Fi. They forgot their ID card. They don't know how to get into the building, right? From a bare bones perspective, my job is to enable our employees. Can they do their jobs effectively? When you throw barriers in like, oh, the Wi-Fi is not working today, or the bathroom wasn't clean and it was locked for 2 hours. I couldn't get in. I had to leave to go to the bathroom at Starbucks. Those are just like fundamental needs that every employee needs. And it's my job to make sure that they have those. So number one thing for any perfect office is accessibility. Further to that, when you look to the tech world, 5 to 10 years ago, a perfect or a wonderful office would have had a ping pong table, beer or kombucha on tap, beanbag chairs, right? All those really kitschy things that in the height of tech were what drew brand new grads, young people with a ton of hunger and drive to an office. I think now when we look at what the perfect office looks like, it looks like flexibility. It looks like realistic and rational perks, right? Our people don't need a 5-star lunch every day. They need something they can probably take back to their desk. Maybe they're dropping their kid off at the dentist in the middle of the day. You know, something that is flexible and that works with their lives now that we're in this pre-COVID world, because an office now is a very different definition than what an office was 5 years ago. So I think to answer your question, a very long answer to your short question, Benjamin, is the perfect office is different for everyone. And I think what people want right now is for their business to meet them where they are, with flexibility, with realistic and rational benefits, and just some understanding of, hey, the world's different today. It's not the same as it was pre-COVID. Employer, what can you do for me so that I can show up my best for you every day?
How do you find out what is what is important to your employees? I think what some of our listeners who share your view and who do think, okay, well, makes perfect sense, realistic benefits, also flexibility, but how do you find out what's really important to people?
There's a couple ways to figure that out. I think the easiest one is you ask them, right? You send out workplace surveys, you send out employee engagement surveys on an agreed upon cadence with your business leaders. That's the easiest and most direct way to find out. I think there's other ancillary ways to understand whether what you're doing in your offices or what you're doing with your remote workforce, because those are both offices, right? You have your virtual office, then you have your on-site physical office. I think an ancillary way to find out what your teams need, because sometimes what they want is very different than what they need, and they might not know necessarily what they need, is to look at other data points. So you can run a survey. We run biannual employee engagement surveys here at Enable. They are 16 questions. We do it 2 times a year, and we answer the same questions every time. And those 16 questions touch a plethora of different topics. One of them is their workplace environment and experience. We send then, in addition to that, monthly pulse questions where we ask the ENPS question of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to refer a friend to work for Enable? And then we also do location-specific surveys. So Enable is global. We are pushing 700 people, and we have 5 different countries with 5 different offices. And what every person in each one of those locations within each department needs and wants is very different. So we get the data from that engagement survey. We get the data from those direct localized workplaces surveys. But what's even more important is, what are our attrition rates in these locations? How are our people feeling when they answer the ENPS question? Is a certain country happier than another? Can we dig into that? Because everyone's going to ask for free sandwiches and more beer. Just be totally transparent with this group. Everyone's going to ask for that. But is that location meeting its goals? Is that location keeping its people? Is that location productive? And if we give them all the perks, but the answer is still no, then we're not giving the team what they need. We're giving them what they want. And what the business needs is for those people to be successful, productive, happy, retained employees. And if the sandwiches, the whatever libation you partake in on tap, and the beanbag chairs, if those aren't, getting us closer to our goals, then that's not what that piece of the business needs. So I think working backwards from what success looks like, all the way back to then the source of that content, which is that survey, what is in the middle? How can you find your success metrics to determine whether what your team is asking for, what you're delivering on, and what the business actually, gets out of it is working? It's a big, giant equation that I think if anybody had pinpointed and completely mastered, we'd all know it by now. But another very long answer to your short question here, Ben, is we utilize as many levers of data as we can, and then compare that to how the business is performing. Because at the end of the day, if there's no bank account to pay the beanbag people, then beanbags are useless, right?
Indeed. Well, it's probably also something that has changed a lot in the last few years, given, data wasn't available on many of the topics you just mentioned years ago, and it's available now.
I think there's been ways to get it before. I think now there's a lot of software that exists to make it a lot easier to obtain, um, without having to overtly ask someone, hi, would you recommend Enable as a place to work? Give me a number of 1 through 10. Right now, there's a lot more technology at our fingertips. There's a ton of ways for us to set these things automatically in the background. So questions like that become part of the DNA of your business. And so your people get into the habit of starting to give you feedback consistently. The other side of that coin, just for everyone listening, is accountability, right? If you're asking for feedback, you need to show that you're acting on it. And we're never going to be able to give everyone what they want. I can't give tri-tip sandwiches every day, but I need to tell them why, right? We publicize all of our feedback. We show everyone, obviously anonymously, what our business is asking for. And then we really honestly answer it. We say, yes, we can get a new vendor if you're not loving it every day. We can completely replace it. We will look at that right now. Here's our goal for when we'll complete that and come back to you, company. But just know that our budget hasn't changed. So we can find a new vendor, but unfortunately we can't spend any more money. So just being honest and accountable to what your teams are asking for, I think also goes just as far as the new sandwiches might. That's a recent challenge for us with our UK team, actually.
Well, I love talking about sandwiches, obviously. Alex, I want to understand the following. So you mentioned, okay, well, it's important to be office specific. It is important to be mindful of things being different in different countries. How do you ensure that everyone is treated fairly? Given one could also say that, well, if we talk of sandwiches, for example, that, you visit a different office and you're like, okay, their sandwiches are much better than ours. So how can you make sure that, well, everything feels okay? The way I'm treated, it's fair. Which is also subjective, right? So not entirely objective. And well, in particular, when it comes to workplace, there are many emotions involved.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Something that I tell my workplaces team is we are here to make sure everything is equitable. It's never going to be equal. And it shouldn't be equal, because what one country values over another should be paid attention to, right? I'll give you an example. We have a team in Australia. There's about 45, maybe 50 of those folks down there now. And some of our perks that Enable for in-office employees are lunch 3 days a week, in addition to office snacks. And one of our offices in Sydney is right in the middle of a bunch of bodegas, and it's really in a great location to where you can walk down the street, grab a cup of coffee, grab some snacks, right? What have you. The team there gave us some feedback saying, we love the lunch. We don't need the snacks. We like to go on a walk for our one-on-ones. We like to go out to get coffee. We don't need this additional stuff. We don't eat it. Is there a world where we can put all this money to an extra day of food instead? So we did that for them. Whereas for the team in the UK, if we offered that to them, I think they'd have my head, because there's no way for them to go walk somewhere else to get lunch or coffee or snacks. They are in a campus that's freeway locked. So they need those snacks. They really rely on those lunch days because they've probably planned their lives, their grocery shopping, their children's lunches around how they show up and what they do at work every day. So we're doing our best to keep everything equitable. We spend the same amount of localized money on each office. Our budgets don't change. But if our teams come to us and say, this isn't working for us, we don't love this, we'll do everything we can to pivot, with the understanding of, we're going to take this pot of money from this bucket and put it in this bucket. There's no additional money. There's just different ways of spending it. Another way to think about it too is, there are tons of different laws, different training requirements, different access law requirements in every location that Enable has a brick and mortar office in. So our employees in California have to do separate trainings that our employees in Toronto do. We can't get away from doing those. We have to do them. But that obviously just by design turns them into somewhat of a different culture within the office. So we really try to lean into those different cultures and celebrate them instead of trying to force them all having the same exact everything all the time. One of my favorite examples is Google. Actually, they do a really good job of this. One of my closest friends is on their engineering side of the house. And when she goes to different offices, you've got Google Boulder, you've got Google Manhattan, you've got Google San Francisco. Each of them have their own colors. their own sticker, their own practices, their own perks, and their localized perks. So Pete's Coffee obviously is a big San Francisco name. That office only serves Pete's Coffee. You go to a different office, they don't have Pete's Coffee. And so they've really found ways to not only champion the cities that they're representing, but give back to those cities by buying things from that city. So I think I would love to see the workplaces world go in more of that direction, where we can, instead of trying to paint everything with a broad brush and just put peanut butter all over the entire piece of bread, back to our sandwiches analogy here, to lean into these cultures and celebrate the fact that they're different. I think it's important. It's really important to celebrate differences and find ways to highlight them in that way.
Indeed, and we love that you brought it back to sandwiches, which is a recurring topic today.
This will be the sandwich podcast. How
Absolutely.
can sandwiches work for you?
I love it. Well, the thing is, well, other than in the UK, they don't serve sandwiches crisps, which is actually really good because, well, crisps are, well, this doesn't really make a good dinner, and I hope I don't annoy people now or a good lunch. I hope I don't annoy people in the UK now. Well, but Alex, can I ask the question around the importance of all this? So how did you find out this is so important for the employee experience? Given one could also say that, well, employee experience, well, as we described it, it's actually very physical, and many companies I know focus very much on the virtual part of the employee experience. So who decided when that Enable should focus on, well, the office is a main part of our employee experience?
I did. I definitely decided. So I'm very close with our CFO, very close. His name is Nick, and he and his wife were invited to my wedding, and we get along swimmingly. One thing we just fundamentally disagreed on when I first joined Enable 3 years ago was who the facilities team reported to. As you can imagine, people in the US healthcare, and then for the rest of the world, real estate are usually the 3 biggest line items on any P&L. And so having one person responsible for all that is a little bit scary for a CFO.
Exactly. Right. Well, that's the girl that kills all my budget.
She spends all my money. Oh my gosh. That is true. I do spend all of his money. Consciously, if he's listening to this. But
and
the
on
way
sandwiches, obviously.
Only on sandwiches. Yes, I do splurge. We splurge on sandwiches. But when I joined, the facilities teams were rolling up to finance, and they were very much just a line item, right? The team was doing great, and Nick is a wonderful people manager, so that was never a concern. But I knew what I could turn this department into. And so he agreed, bless his heart, to let me take it all over. And that was about 3 years ago. We've expanded to so many offices since then. But I think convincing the rest of the executive team that the office environment experience, both remote and brick and mortar, was a major component of the employee experience was not difficult. I think anyone that sees or manages or signs a paycheck, really, anyone that can see the day-to-day life of an office worker can understand how barriers can make their lives and their jobs so much harder. I mentioned earlier, one of my jobs is making everything accessible. There's nothing more frustrating for a new hire when they don't know where to go, where they don't know who's meeting them at the office, where they don't know how to get in. That's a horrible way to start what's supposed to be your welcome to the world, welcome to your new life moment, right? So I wanted control of all of that. I wanted to make sure that there was no excuse, there was no possibility where someone couldn't have a wonderful experience here. My CEO put it in a really great way. His name's Andrew Butt. Really good design, you can't see. You think of like Apple, right? You don't think of Apple's design. You don't think of their brand. You don't think of how they're approaching or advertising to their people. You just feel it. And that's the approach that we've tried to take with our workplaces team is if someone's Wi-Fi is connecting, if someone knows where they're sitting, if someone knows how to book a hotel desk, if someone knows where to go find lunch, if someone knows when the holiday party is, when their anniversary gift is coming, if they know all these things, then we're doing a great job. The problem is when they don't know them and they have to ask and they start to question things. It's kind of like payroll as an example for the other side of the house, right? You should never know how payroll is run. If you do, there's probably a problem. So one of the ways that we made sure that the rest of the team understood exactly how important workplaces was in the broader employee experience was having them focus on employee recognition. Very similar concept, right? They get their birthday gift from us and they don't really know how it happens. They get their anniversary gift. They get their food delivered. The company kickoff that we do twice a year happens and it's a celebration. It just shows up one day. It's on their calendar. They're excited that it's coming. They don't need to see everything that goes on in the background, but we reap the benefits. So I mentioned those really important metrics earlier, ENPS, retention, company performance, all those things can be tied back to location, to manager, to employee. And it's my job to make sure that I'm broadcasting that back up and around to my peers to show them, hey, look, when we did our company kickoff where we brought everyone together and celebrated them for 2 days, our ENPS shot through the roof. And oh my gosh, we also hit our numbers that quarter. Wow. So it's up to the people and places leader, the people leader, the facilities leader, whatever we call ourselves, to find those stories, pull them out and broadcast them so that you can get more budget, so that your CFO lets you manage those people, right? There's so many ways to tout and celebrate your efforts. You just got to find the data and then tie it back to the story.
What are key KPIs you're looking at, given, I picture people listening to our podcast and who agree with you that, well, this sounds like a great story, it makes perfect sense, but when you go to your CFO and try to make sure, okay, well, it's perhaps not as far as Alex's approach, but I want to get going. What kind of metric, what kind of KPIs can you impact and influence?
Mm-hmm. I think people and places teams can and should impact every KPI. There's obviously company level indicators. Is the company meeting its goals from a financial perspective? From, if I've grown up in software, from a product perspective, from a build perspective, right? Are you hitting the milestones that you've told your investors or the public that you're going to hit? That is number one. Underneath those KPIs are things like attrition, whether it's regretted or non-regretted. Hiring velocity. Are you bringing in the people that you need on time? What are their offer acceptance rates? That tells you if they're competitive, if your offers are competitive or not. Office attendance. Do you have a return to work policy now that we're coming out of this COVID world? Are your people engaged? Are they coming in? Do they want to come in? Can you track who's coming into your office space? Maybe not by human, but by amount, right? ENPS is extremely important. Do your employees feel that they could refer people to work here? What's even nicer is we work with a company called Lattice, and they do a really great job of bifurcating that data for us so that we can drill down, of course, through agreed upon anonymity thresholds. We can drill down to see ENPS by department, by manager, by location. So if we can pinpoint that within an engineering team, for example, we've got maybe 100 people on the DevOps team. We've got one whole pillar of them. They're not hitting their goals. They are not coming into the office. There's a question mark there. If we zoom into that manager's ENPS score, it's probably poor. So in that circumstance, just to give you a real life example of where we can show value, we would deploy the workplaces team to that manager. We'd say, okay, your team is not coming in. They're clearly not happy. Your ENPS score is negative 76 as a manager. That's not great. The people team is going to talk to you about that to understand what you can do as a manager to maybe increase that number. But to get your team's morale back up, why don't we throw a pizza party? Why don't we do a bowling night, right? The workplaces team has budget at Enable to where we can go out and proactively bring teams together so that we can do everything we can to set that manager up for success who has a negative 76 ENPS. Then you deploy the people business partner. They're the one working with the manager to say, okay, your team's really not happy. Talk me through your practices. Are you having one-on-ones? We can also track that. That's a really nice KPI. There's so many opportunities to find stories within the data that you have so that that DevOps team can reach its goals, can be more productive, ultimately going back up the tree. I know you all can't see my hands, but I'm pretending to be a tree. You go back up the tree to that business KPI of build and product, and they've hit it all of a sudden. right? So when you set those business goals, it's my job to make sure that our people goals are following those and that we are attacking and zooming in wherever we don't see those goals being met and using the resources that we have to help the business meet them. So I could talk about KPIs forever. That could be its own podcast episode, but I hope that answers your question, Ben.
Indeed, and I'm wondering, so if one of our listeners wants to, well, make the first steps to combine some places function within the people function, and well, most of the people who are listening are, well, definitely from the people side. What are first steps to, well, to start making the workplace, well, the place people want to be?
I think even if you don't have a dedicated workplaces team, there are a ton of creative ways to foster the type of environment that you would like to draw your people in. You know, I think most offices have some sort of reception or office management, secretarial, administrative functions to where they sit within the office and they see and support everyone, right? I think when you look at product, engineering, sales, accounting, they don't necessarily engage with the entire community. I think it's really important to create a group of people if they don't exist already, like an established workplaces team. It's really important to create a group of people that do support everybody. And so an example, when we were scaling up our Toronto office, we've had one workplaces coordinator there. There's now 300 people in that office. She can't support all 300. She already has a big job, and we like to keep our ratios at about 1 to 150, one workplaces person to 150 people in a brick and mortar location that requires management. You go to like a WeWork and that doesn't require management. It's a lot easier to manage. They do the cleaning, they pay the bills, right? That's a managed site. A non-managed site requires a lot of heavy lifting. And so my poor workplaces coordinator there does not have the capability, the time, the bandwidth to create, weekly trivia games. She can't make sure that the team is satisfied with their weekly lunch surveys. There's so much that she has to do to manage that building. So before we were able to add another headcount to that unit, we created something called the social committee. And we threw an email out there and we said, hey, we are tight staffed. We know this building can use a lot more oomph. Is anyone willing to raise their hand and meet once a month and just creatively maybe, plan some activities? We can go play ping pong at Spin down the street once a month. We've got the budget for that. We just need the humans to help us get it done. We had so many people volunteer after that email that we had to cut it off and say, okay, thanks. Thanks, everybody. We're good. And now we have like 25 people that meet once a month. The workplaces coordinator runs that meeting. She makes them all work for her. And now we have the longest list of things that our people want to do. And it's just one additional way to keep them engaged of things that are not just their job. So it's, one of many ways where we've been understaffed, over-indexed, and found a way to make the business work a little bit for us in a way that benefits them.
Makes perfect sense indeed. One last question I had was, what do you think does the future hold for a function like yours, where you look into people and into places, and recalling the last few years when just prior to COVID, everyone was like, okay, office is the place to be. 2 years later, okay, everyone will work from home going forward. We don't need any offices at all. And now everything's a bit back to kind of normal. So what is your outlook for the next few years?
I do see the return to office efforts really, really ramping back up. I do manage all of our real estate expansion as well in partnership with the CFO. Nick does not let me sign those contracts, as you can probably imagine. He should not let me sign those things. But we work with our brokers in every location extremely closely. And, we've built great relationships with them. I'm very broker loyal. And, it's kind of down to finding someone you can trust that will give you good guidance. And we've been very fortunate. I've found a handful of really wonderful brokers that have shown up for us when we've needed them, and I trust them entirely. And what we're hearing a lot from them is that there's still a really big gap in corporate real estate, meaning not a lot of companies are coming back. Or if they are coming back, they're coming back in a different capacity where the model is a little bit more hybrid focused, or they are shrinking their teams to where only certain teams like services need to be on site for a certain reason. So I think when I look into my workplace's crystal ball, I don't ever see us going back to a world where everyone is in the office 5 days a week. I think most of the world has kind of put their foot down and said, no, I've shown you success from home. I can continue to show you success from home. I've worked my life around this. Sorry, pound sand, right? Some of the bigger companies I know, like Meta is bringing people back, Shopify is bringing people back. Again, I live in tech, so excuse that most of my references are tech companies. But they're also seeing a lot of pushback. And there's a lot of good people on the market right now because they've refused to go back to an office. And so I think that wave of people is going to really turn the tide and force businesses to, I think I said this earlier in this conversation, force businesses to meet them where they are, force businesses to meet employees where they are, and kind of listen to the candidates and say, this person is great. I can probably deal with them being in 3 days a week instead of 5. That's something I can flex on. So I think the future is flexible. I think the future is a little bit less expensive, right? I think the days of lunch every day and kombucha on tap are gone. Thankfully, we can't afford that anymore these days, right? And I think it's going to be more about the employee than it will be about the employer. That's certainly the approach we've taken as a business, and I really hope to see other businesses taking that same approach.
Cool. The very last question, since we talked so much about sandwiches, what's your favorite one?
Oh, I wish my body liked grilled cheese as much as I do. That's my favorite sandwich. That's always out in the ether for me that I can't have. But every once in a while, I just do it, and boy, do I regret it and love it every single time.
Yeah, well, one has to do what's also so good for the heart, right? So
that's right.
And
that's
not,
my
not
heart.
literally, right?
Yeah, that's horrible for my heart. Literally, yeah.
Cool, Alex. Thank you so much for that cheerful conversation. It was great talking to you, and thanks a lot for providing a perspective. I think not that many leaders have when it comes to, well, it's about people, but it's also where we work and where we can be productive and how can we be the most productive.
Totally. Thank you for having me, Ben. Loved it.
Thank you so much again. And well, thanks a lot for you guys listening in, and see you next time.